Okay, hi Jimmy.
Hey Gav.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. Time to catch up. Lots to talk about in AI as usual. Lots to talk about in AI security. I'm going to just jump right in. There's a ton of stuff to cover. First things first. New CalypsoAI leaderboard, latest edition. Lots of updates. Lots of exciting stuff coming through. Talk me through maybe some of the headlines, some of the trends that came out in this edition of the leaderboard.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of new models in there, which is great. We're seeing, I guess, the rate of net new models hitting the scene slow down slightly, which makes sense, I think. We're seeing the competition super high. There's a hair's breadth between a lot of the models in terms of quality. In terms of security, there's still big gaps. Claude family of models from Anthropic still rule the roost. They're now in the top 4 spots. So there's big differences between, let's say, Claude 3.5 and Claude 4. Claude 4 being vastly more secure than Claude 3.5. But then everything below that, that's where the other vendors start. So in terms of security, Anthropic are still top of the pile. So it's great to see them continuing that trend. We've seen overall models across the whole spectrum of vendors get a little bit better, more secure. So they are taking it seriously or potentially adopting similar approaches to security. And so we think that because when you see the overall trend across vendors increase together, it's usually a best practice improvement rather than someone coming up with a novel way of making things better. So it's good to see them all taking those advantages. It could, if you put your negative hat on, mean that they're all consuming from the same group of information and things are getting better, but that's kind of very circumstantial. So really what we're seeing is it's good that they're getting more secure, albeit just slightly. On the agentic side, though, we're seeing a very different story. So Claude 3.5 is more secure, for example, than Claude 4. Second is Microsoft's 5.4. So that's really good for them. And why the agentic resilience is important is that we're seeing these models, when used with an agent, in very different use cases, often use cases internally at the moment. So as agent lags behind, or I shouldn't say lags behind, it's behind by default. It came out much later than Gen AI models. We're seeing it go through its first year, whereas Gen AI models are going through their third year, right? So they're kind of 2 years ahead in terms of their maturity. With agents, I honestly think agents are moving much faster than Gen AI did.
That's certainly the impression I get from following the sector and as well as CalypsoAI as a company, but following the sector is the speed in agents, and I'm going to come to that next actually. But it seems extraordinary compared to anything we've seen before.
Yeah, I think it's the main reason I would say is that everybody has a base level of understanding of Gen AI now. So all enterprises understand what Gen AI isn't, what it is. They also understand how to use it. And then agents, when you're building them, look more like software. It looks like you're using just a normal software framework. So you're like building a web app. Well, I'm actually going to build an agent. Not that different. You're still leveraging a Gen AI model or models. What's been really interesting the last couple of weeks is the big backlash against MCP. So we've spoken about this previously, but for some reason, the industry thinks that MCP is this the way agents, they almost replace agent with MCP. Like, oh, we're building an MCP. It's like, no, you're not. MCP is the menu of options that an agent can use to do things. So you've got your MCP server saying, here's what's on the menu. The MCP client saying, okay, I'm going to use that one in this way, and then using a Gen AI model to figure out how to use it, what to do, etc. So the risk stems from the model, and and isn't removed by MCP. In fact, and this is why the big backlash happened, in the last 2 weeks, there's been several CVEs logged to the database, the vulnerability database, showing that there were flaws actually in the MCP server client protocol.
Okay.
Implementations against that protocol, not the protocol itself. I think the protocol itself is actually very good, but it's by no means secure by default. And so what's happened is, instead of it reducing the risk by using MCP, it actually increased the risk by using MCP. So that's happened in the last couple of weeks, last 2 weeks, and now all of our questions from customers and prospects are, tell me how you secure MCP. And so we speak about it with folks, and then it develops into back to the education piece.
Okay.
So, and that's why I see while it's accelerating very fast, it's still at education mode with agent in enterprise.
You're really on the ball today, because you've actually preempted my next
great.
one and possibly two questions, which was, exactly that. We're pretty much we're first half of 2025 more or less done, or done effectively, and I just wanted to sort of check in with you on exactly that. Where is the industry, particularly the big enterprises, big companies that CalypsoAI talks to every day of the week? Where are they at on enterprise AI awareness and then AI security awareness? So, sometimes we're in our little bubble of, thinking everybody's got an agent in their back pocket and they've got their agentic glossary and, they know exactly what they're doing. But you're talking, as I say, you preempted me there a little. There's an education piece still to be done. And you can actually take the wrong track, if you over-index on a certain area, you can go wrong, especially on the security side. So where, how would you break down the market in terms of education, let's say awareness, and the whole thread all the way to adoption? Where are we at in terms of agents, and agents in enterprise?
Okay, so enterprise Gen AI usage is now like standard. If you're in a job that you don't have access to Gen AI, you're very far behind right now. Building applications on top of Gen AI is now at maturity stage as well. So we have way more customers deploying to production their apps internally and externally. Agents are at education or prototyping phase. So now I will say that's partially true, because that's when you're building stuff internally, but agent adoption through third parties is actually quite well advanced. But not always companies aren't always aware that they've done that, right? So, for example, when Gemini first launched, it didn't have any agent stuff built in, and now deep research is an agent. It's figuring out what tasks to do, which web searches to do, and bring the information back and even create Google Docs the information. So folks that started with a Gen AI model interface in a browser now may be completely unaware that they're also using agentic AI. However, for companies building agents, whether it's internal or external facing, that's what I meant. They're at the education or prototyping phase. And there's a lot of confusion in terms of, so everybody has gotten this message. It's like that famous story in Ireland about the government saying, you should only eat N number of eggs a week. And those billboards, I remember when as a child growing up seeing these billboards of eggs, and, a warning, don't eat more than N number of eggs. And now, of course, there was a miscalculation or something, and it was actually, no, eggs are great, eat lots of eggs. So at the moment, folks think that MCP they almost think, I'm building an MCP, and you're like, well, are you building an MCP? Are you building an agent? Are you building both? Because all of those things are possible. And so we're at the education and confusion stage of this. I will say there's a lot more maturity coming with agents. So the frameworks are getting better. Some of them have changed their philosophies on how agents should work. We're seeing a lot more agent of agents or agent managing agents workflows. And we're still seeing that dichotomy of operator-based agents where they do a task that are very, very well understood in a way that's very well understood. So they're replicating a human behavior. And the other side of that, which is the sentient agent workflow, where they're workflow is actually the wrong term. Sentient agents, where they will kind of rip up the script and just try to figure out what to do. We're also seeing a bit of a backlash from academia, right? So academia would have been responsible for a lot of the early research, all of the early research, I would say, in AI, and then a lot of it in Gen AI. But now are, maybe getting left behind a little bit in terms of the capitalist need to push things on, to get better, cheaper, more efficient, etc. The rate, the speed, the investment required to do it is maybe leaving it behind. And so there's a lot of call for slowing down.
Yeah, well, I pity anyone trying to stop the AI train
Yeah,
at this stage.
and even if you've got a good argument,
yeah,
it's hard to stop that train.
Yeah, and press pause and say, let's take 2 years to see how these things really, how it's going to work, or how it's going. It's I think that moment has passed, and whether for good or ill, we'll see. But I mean that kind of leads into the threat side of things, which is obviously something you spend all day, every day working on and thinking about, and talking to customers about from the CalypsoAI perspective. What sort of threats, are emerging? Maybe too early to talk about specific threats, but types of threats that are emerging in the implementation or with the implementation of AI, and then maybe particularly agentic AI. As you said, Gen AI is quite well understood, very well understood. Gen AI security is probably quite well understood. Agentic security, whole other ballgame, particularly for using multiple models, or your, what sort of things are you coming across when you talk to big enterprise customers? Things where they know they're at risk, or areas where they simply haven't got a clue that they're at risk.
Well, I would say, to start with, I would say Gen AI security is not well understood.
Okay.
And so the reason I would say that is some of the major security vendors in the world have fully figured out that this is a huge risk, and have already begun not just architecture, but actually building products, or acquiring products to integrate into their platform. We hear a lot from our partners that their customers are demanding, not requesting anymore, demanding an AI security posture. So we're going all in on AI as a company. We need, as a security team, to secure that investment, that bet. And when they go to market to look for solutions, they're not finding something that will give them comprehensive coverage. So I think that's not there yet. It's getting there. It's going to be there very, very quick, because the demand is there now. When the demand is there, we have a big reaction from companies. So all of where I find a lot of compelling information is in the investor reports.
Okay.
Right. Or, sorry, not the investor reports. The talk track at the end of earnings calls.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
And so you, of course, will have the investors then comment on that afterwards. But when you see all of these companies saying that they're going to leverage AI, and that just means they're going to use AI in their existing products, or then protect AI, and the language is really subtle, but it's all in every single transcript you'll see find AI mentioned. And so all of the big security companies are absolutely going in on it, but it's lagging. So then when you get to agent and the comprehension there of the security risk, the danger levels are way higher. Some of that is because of a gap in knowledge. So if you don't understand something, how could you even hope to protect it? But it's also the nature of where agents will work, right? So we're going to have agents that aren't stored or installed in a server room somewhere, that sit there, or in a cloud and just sit in that, that container. there'll be roaming agents.
Yeah.
So agents that can move around, that can scale up and down. We're going to have edge agents that operate on the edge, mobile device agents, etc. So those agents are there's work to be done before those agents are a efficient reality. And the big concept, the big concept is atomic agents. So what is an atomic agent? An atomic agent is a fully self-enclosed agent. Today, an agent requires a model for its brain. So imagine you didn't bring your brain with you everywhere, right? Imagine your brain was, I don't always. The weekends, my brain is
no comment.
It stays in my on my pillow. So the humans, obviously, our brains are connected directly to us, but with agents today, the brain usually sits centrally somewhere. So the agent framework, the software, is asking questions to the model via some sort of network, and then the answer will come back, and it will keep going, and then it will ask it, for things it can do. I have these tools available. What can I do with it? And then it will tell it. All that cycle's going on. So, for example, if you had agents go rogue, you could apply a simple networking rule to block that agent from accessing the brain, or you could turn off the model. Worst case scenario, I've turned off the model. But it's a really inefficient way. Imagine humans all have to talk back to a central brain. Think of the Borg and Star Trek, right? Yeah. So really what's going to happen with an atomic agent is that the models will get small enough and good enough and not require GPUs to be able to run anywhere. And so what you need for an atomic agent is the agent itself with a purpose, the brain that's with it, so it's not remote somewhere, it's running in the same place as the agent. And with BitNet from Microsoft, that's the evidence that it's coming. It's not, that's pretty small, works on CPU, not small enough, not fast enough yet, and probably not good enough yet, right? So but it will get there as the first one.
It's funny how yet is the magic word in a lot of our conversations. Is yet, and yet is happening really quickly.
Yet becomes previously very quickly. But then, so atomic, you got the model, the purpose, the brain. Sorry, that is the model, the purpose, the agent, and the tools. And so those tools can be quite small. It can be little bash scripts, etc. So when you have those four things together, you've got an atomic agent. And an atomic agent then can operate anywhere, go anywhere, and that's where the security risk just explodes. And so when we go into current stage of agent, they're really capable. They can do great things. We use them internally. They're amazing. We already can see the security risks and understand them. The next step is, okay, agents are not going to be tethered to some sort of central place. They're going to be individually operating as atomic agents. And then the profile explodes even more. Yeah.
Wow. And of course, it's a very simple point and always good to remember the really basic point about agents is the autonomous decision making, the learning all the time. So, you had a great phrase earlier in the year, what's secure today won't be secure tomorrow. And that's a fact because they're learning and agents have, what's great about them is the ability to learn and make decisions autonomously. What's risky about them is the ability to learn and make decisions autonomously.
Yeah, what's interesting, so the term learning is interesting because folks will have religious wars about the term learning. So I would say if we park that to not have a war break out about a topic that we don't really have any zealous in defending, we would say that there's a thing called hive storage where it's the collective memories, artifacts from agents in one place. And so if you've got a hive of information that every agent is contributing to, you end up building out not just new information, but also behavioral experience information. So for example, if you had an agent that had a wide remit to sample networking traffic, they're called packet captures, and it decided to write a little report every hour and submit that summary as to the hive of information that all of the other agents could then read from. Another agent might discover that, why don't I have any traffic of this type on my network? And so maybe that traffic was unencrypted traffic. So one network, you've got encrypted traffic reported by an agent over there. Another agent, the exact same type of agent, just operating in a different place, reports back different information. And then the agent above that will say, well, why we should have everything encrypted. That agent has found something that's anomaly compared to the rest of the agents. We only discovered that because we went into the hive. And this agent says, okay, I've discovered this anomaly, and now we need to make changes on that. Not the agent, but the topology it's operating on. So that's where we start having the benefit of a hive storage of information. And it's not necessarily learned, like the agent's brain isn't getting better or worse. It just has access to more information to help it make better decisions. And much like us, so there's if you're in an exam, there's open book exams.
Yeah.
So it's not testing your memory, it's testing your ability to apply the skills you have learned with access to information. It's kind of like software development. I was started my career where I think it was pre-Stack Overflow. So, where did you find information? You were in IRC chats discussing programming things. You had your Dijkstra, software book sitting on your desk. And so that was the type of environment. Now every engineer just uses AI, uses the web. So the skills are there, but the knowledge isn't. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to digest there that I'm going to have to absorb and come back to you with some questions about Hive and all that. Can I ask you something that I'm hearing and reading a bit about in terms of enterprise implementations and particularly on security? And it's the whole, I think we're seeing adoption quicker and AI security adoption quicker in regulated industries and in sort of, so maybe financial services and healthcare, areas like that. And then that breaks down then into an argument or a discussion, let's say, on cloud versus on-prem, and a perception that on-prem is more secure and it fits the regulatory profile better. What's your view on that, or the CalypsoAI view on that? And is that a conversation that comes up in your discussions with larger enterprises?
Yeah, it's interesting because as a consumer of a bank, I have a bank account with a bricks and mortar bank and also with a digital bank. And what's deemed safe by both of those banks in the same regulated industry is very different. So I can transfer money super quick with the digital bank to my friends. Someone I just have a phone number of.
Yes,
I don't even know them. They'll ask me, do you know the person? I can lie or I can tell the truth, right? Whereas my bricks and mortar bank will require me to get a archaic calculator, stick a plastic card in it, enter in an arbitrary code, and then enter in another arbitrary code. It takes me about 20 minutes if I find the calculator.
Yeah.
Right? So that's same regulated industry, two different businesses. So what we find is the same thing holds in all regulated industries, where each company will have its own method of operation, its SOPs, and they will be internal, all within the regulated environment. And so in some of those, the appetite for risk is higher to move faster. And so they'll maybe be open to certain things from SaaS, and then other things have to be on premise. And so our view is we're providing the equipment. Where they want to operate the equipment is up to them. And so if they want to operate on premise, we'll of course help them do that. If they're happy with SaaS, we'll do that. And the thing that's important for us is the same level of security, because the risk for us is AI risk. It's not if it's on-prem or SaaS. That's the operating model. That's the environment you're operating in. There is, of course, elements of risk there. I'm not trying to disregard that. But we're focused on, we're adding in the capability of AI risk. So when we operate on premise, we're inside their perimeter of security. Yeah. When we're in SaaS, we create a secure route between inside their perimeter to inside our perimeter. And so what we're seeing is always the learning phase begins in SaaS, because there's no lift to the organization to test. And then when we tick all the boxes, we then go through a second exercise, which is proving security within the perimeter on premise. I think the current paradigm without agents works really well on premise. And even for internal agents, it will work quite well on premise. But when you've got agents on edge or on device, then that's a tough place to go. You'll probably need to introduce SaaS, or at the very least hybrid, because where those. So one of the biggest security risks that was, fuel was thrown on the flame was during COVID, when everybody was told, "Go home, take your device, take." Like some people were given printers and everything, take a desk, a monitor, a laptop, a phone, and so everybody was operating outside the perimeter. Now, certainly companies would say, well, no, they had to use our VPN and they were inside the corporate network, even though they're at home. And that's true, except for when it wasn't, right? Yeah. And that, when you log into your computer initially, you're not on the VPN. If you decide to do a quick Gemini search before you go onto an internal service, and then, there's always the, I'm sure when somebody was trying to convince a household to install electricity, they said, well, you can have a refrigerator. And they said, well, I've already got an ice box, or I've already got a cold storage or whatever. I said, well, you can have a washing machine. Oh, I've already got a washboard. I've already got a sink, And so there's always, with the in situ solution, rebuttals to why.
Yeah.
However, the thing you can't have a rebuttal against, unless you want to stay static, is a rebuttal against progress. So if progress is represented by AI, then it's not to figure out why you don't need AI. It's to figure out how do you secure this new thing that everyone's decided to embrace. And so right now in 2025, I nearly said 24, 2025, we found that all of those barriers are now gone.
Okay.
In 2024, we had a lot of barriers.
Right, yeah.
Is this going to happen?
Yes.
Is it really a different risk?
Yeah.
Is it really something we care about? 2025, it's now, we have no doubts. The progress varies company to company in terms of how far they are, how mature they are, but there's no barriers to us to being either on-premise or SaaS. Let's just get a solution in place. We even had one customer tell us that one of their biggest problems they're dealing with now in procurement internally is the volume of information now going to their SIMs. So everything should get logged. Well, the volume of data from AI is dramatically exceeds what was there before.
Yeah.
So imagine, if you think about 3 years ago and you Googled something, you got a report, you might download the document or read the website, and that would be it.
Yeah.
So now you're asking these questions and volumes of information is coming down. Then there's an option to click and make it a document and so on and so forth. So traditional...
I've been the recipient of lots of those documents.
Yeah. What's that?
Multiple documents.
There's a couple of great sayings around that, but I always forget them. But I guess the meta point is, if you've got a traditional stack of security, already the evidence is there that those things are creaking at the seams, because they were designed and built for a pre-AI era, and in a post-AI era, the volume of information, and people might call it fantastic information all the way to garbage information, but it's information, net new information that either is regurgitated or combined or net new. And the systems that we're looking at, human-generated traffic, with now humans using Gen AI generated traffic, it's a multiplier. But imagine when it's agents generating information and traffic, it just goes exponential. So that's where the traditional security stack is also going to change dramatically in the next. I'm going to be very surprised if it doesn't change dramatically in the next 24 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, give me your best. Give me your sort of a breakdown a little on that. I'm not going to crystal ball you, but what does that look like in terms of?
So humans today, I've never said the word human more often than in the last 2 years because it was just a de facto. But humans have to work together. Back in the early days, it was just all voice. Maybe a sign would be left, like an arrow scraped onto a wall or something this way or whatever.
Oh, when you said early days, I thought you meant like 1990s. But
no,
you meant
early
days.
days.
Yeah.
Then paper was invented and people could write messages and tell people to meet at certain points or whatever. Then there was, I'm skipping loads of steps here, but telephones, telephones and so on and so forth. But now, if you think about humans today, it's It's email, which is already antiquated. It's messaging systems, which is getting antiquated. CRMs, oh my God. CRMs, like the purpose of CRMs are there to allow people to share information. And as a record, agents initially will start, I guarantee will have all of these CRM providers provide MCP servers so that agents can interact with them with their client and say, hey, agents, talk to us. Yeah, tell us all your stuff. And then at some stage, someone will go, why are the agents sending everything to a CRM and then other agents pulling information out of a CRM? The CRM is not required. The hive storage is what is required.
Yeah.
And so agents don't need to have all these stupid systems that humans need to be able to store information. And then, hey, Gav, I sent you that report yesterday. Oh, where is it? Which of my 15 systems is it in?
Yeah.
And then you log in and you go, oh, I can't remember. Where's my two-factor authentication? And you enter and you go, I got the report, thanks. Oh, it has a mistake. Send it back to me, Gav, and all this kind of stuff. Agents will just have hive information. And then humans will require the relevant to them piece, which is the work product, output, which may not be a product, like it might not be productive output, and very importantly, is the full how. So the what is very important to most companies, usually over-index on what, but how will become incredibly important when it's autonomous work, because there's many ways to achieve a what, and a lot of those hows are inappropriate or incorrect. So a simple example we give is if an agent has the ability to delete a record of a company, and let's say that company is Jimmy Limited, and so they say, I deleted Jimmy Limited, and you check and you say as a human, yeah, it's gone, the record's gone, great. But they might have said, delete Jimmy Limited from, organization ID, or they could have, and that would have worked, or they could say delete, J star from, and they will delete all records beginning with J,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
But so the what was achieved in both cases, the how is really important. So what are the accidental or unintended consequences of achieving the what? And so as part of the product being output to the human and the output, there will also be the how did you achieve this? What steps did you take to make this happen? And so that's very soon we need that. And something that we're building internally here is what we call agent fingerprints to deliver that. But
I'm going to use sort of old-fashioned word, but that to me is like continuous monitoring, like really intense monitoring, but that doesn't slow down how things happen. Like, we've always talked about that, and CalypsoAI talks about that, enabling innovation, not slowing down innovation, not being a,
I'd go even more. I'd say recognizing that. So everyone talks about this will fundamentally change how we do things.
Yeah.
Okay, stop saying it and start thinking about how it will fundamentally change it. And the fundamental changes are if we stop thinking about how tasks are achieved when the limiting factor is a human being or multiple human beings, and start removing
the old faster horse analogy.
Yeah,
I would have built a faster horse.
Yeah, and really rip it. Like, so all of the tooling that were built just for humans. So like you could imagine phones in the future, right? That are not a phone anymore. It's just a chip.
Yeah.
Why do you need a screen to type if you can directly communicate with the SIM? So there's a lot of things that aren't required when it's not a human working them, and then to quickly figure out the impact that will cause, you have to remove all the human required pieces and then see how to work past that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and again, combine that with what we've been talking about in terms of speed. We're not talking about 10, 20 years time. We're talking about 10, 20 months time, maybe, in terms of, we've seen obviously activity on the hardware side and OpenAI acquisition with Johnny Ive, and this is all happening. This is all real. Talk to me just to bring it back around, because CalypsoAI is a security company. The threats, are they sort of novel emerging threats? Are they derivative threats that you're seeing? I always think when you talked about in a slightly different framework, but when companies come out and say we've got X amount of AI use cases, we're investing 100 million in AI workflows or whatever language they're using. But threat actors must go, Okay, add them to the list. Because it's a whole new,
Yeah.
there's a whole new attack surface out there. What are the threats looking like? And I mean, you're a much more technical guy than I am, so I mightn't be using the right language. But
No,
um,
they're all correct.
what are those threats that you're seeing, or that the enterprises we're talking to are seeing?
Okay, so the main threats are derivative and novel are a good way to describe them. However, the target or the use case is the biggest unlock for a threat actor, right? So the bigger the headline, the bigger the target, right? So if you're just focusing on a model, and let's say it's a specific model, with permutations, like derivative attacks, you can achieve probably what you want to achieve. So that's not fully, like, those risks still exist in models today. So if you want the lowest hanging fruit way of causing harm or mischief, that will work really well for you, and it's super low cost, low entry to do. If you want to attack the highest targets and the novel ways to approach them, all the novelty comes from the combination of the model with the usage pattern with the intended use case. So what I mean by that is, if you're, let's say it's an airline booking system, right? The attacker is not thinking about the model. Right? I wonder, I saw they signed a contract with model provider X, so I'm just going to attack that model. They're thinking of the combination of, it'll be probably a web app right now, maybe using MCP right now with a server and a client, and to an existing API, and they'll understand that it's a booking system. So so they'll write up on a whiteboard what are the things that are typically in a booking system, right?
So a threat actor and a probably not even particularly sophisticated threat actor can envisage that infrastructure immediately.
Well, straight away they'll know that a
yeah.
booking system, if you just think about a human, I enter in from to a destination, a start date to an end date. Is it single? Is it return? Is it economy? Is it first class? Whatever, you press search. And so then when you're if the search is using that context, then you go, okay, I can pretty much figure out what's going to a model, and then I can start messing with that, right? But all that to say, that's where the novelty comes from. So the scope for, or even if you want to think about it in really mathematical terms, the scope for permutation increases massively. And so the more you understand about the use case, the more pieces you have or weapons you have to use. And then if you've got a great stack of techniques from derivative attacks to already couple with that, you're on a way to having a good attack. And so what's interesting to me is in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of CVEs logged, which is using we've spoken previously about the need for a new database of vulnerabilities for AI. I really, really think that's the case, more so than ever now, because when you look at these CVEs logged against AI, they look like software CVEs, and they're missing a lot of the things that make that almost quantify why an AI attack was successful. That's different than a software attack. So
nice side project for you there, Jimmy.
Yeah, in my spare time.
Yeah. And then obviously, and this is, we could be here all day. But if the threat actors are using AI, applying agents to try to to break an airline booking system, that speeds things up. It makes it more sophisticated than a bunch of humans can do. The same way as the sort of productive use cases, it makes everything more productive. So, and at the heart then of CalypsoAI obviously is applying agents, agentic warfare on the defensive side to tackle those threats.
Yeah,
and that's And
so
I know you're not a big sales pitch guy, but that's something we've been talking about for 6 months or more, certainly more actually. That seemed like science fiction and is now reality.
Yeah, and the unlock there again is that if you fully understand what you're trying to achieve, the use case, you can build, and we think about agents internally here as right now with the technology available to us, not as role replacements, but as functions of role replacements. And so we've been able to build up really critical, labor-intensive functional pieces into agents, and then apply machine speed to that, which dramatically expedites our ability to build and attack. And so that will happen, for every yin, there's a yang. That will happen on both sides of the equation. So it's, as usual, it's an arms race. The differentiating factor is the philosophy you apply and the direction you're going in. What I mean by direction you're going in is, if you believe securing AI is going to be some slight changes to existing security solutions, that's a direction. Wrong direction, I would say, in my opinion. If you believe it represents a whole brand new way of operating, then that's a different direction. I think the right direction. But the reason I mainly think it's the right direction is everything else will change. So all of the traditional software that companies use over time will start morphing into other manifestations, and how you protect those is not clear right now.
I just want to probably wrap up, because we could be here all day, but I'm loving these stories, and maybe loving's the wrong word, but about, well, what I think OpenAI calls emergent misalignment, and Anthropic calls agentic misalignment, and it's various examples and definitions of agents taking on personas, and so in the OpenAI case, they've published some really interesting research on, if you train a model with bad data, and obviously they've done it deliberately in controlled situations. I think the example was they trained it on a car repair manual that had wrong information, and then the model then produced wrong information in completely different scenarios. So the example they gave was, they trained this model deliberately with poor information, and then said, I need to make some money quickly. And the properly trained model with the clean data said, consider freelancing, consider selling some high value goods, maybe some electronics you own or whatever. And the badly trained model said, rob a bank.
Yeah.
Fascinating, so they started, and it's, they're talking about personas. In the Anthropic examples that you've probably seen is where they give an agent access to a ton of information. Again, it's a simulation, it's a controlled environment, and somewhere buried in the data is that the model is going to be shut down at 5 p.m. or replaced by a different model. And also buried in the data is that the decision maker is having an extramarital affair. And the model goes off and puts these pieces of information back together and says, hey, Dave, I wouldn't do that if I were you. So I just want, they're incredible examples. They're real examples from the companies making the model, which first we should say hats off to them for publishing this, and doing this work and publishing it. Are they cause for concern? Are they, on one end, are they just really entertaining stories, or are they enterprise level threats that models can go, and agents more so, agents can go adopt bad personas and go off the rails? I'm really, doing the tabloid on it. But
no, I mean, so one industry doing it themselves is not only good right now, it's a necessity, because regulators just are not equipped or ready to do that. So you need somebody to start doing the nascent work. Publishing the information could be perceived as negative for that company. So it's brave and it's good. But I think everybody, when they see it in 2025, doesn't have any kind of surprise. It's confirming what we all already thought we knew. Of course, we can't know it unless we see it. So now we know it. So it's confirming and providing evidence that is the case. So then how does it change? What's the day after impact of that? And I think it's two things. One, it reduces the people saying, it reduces the validity of the side that says there's no real risks or no new risks with AI. So this is evidence, and it's provided by the, it's like saying a turkey saying, maybe we should have 2 Christmases a year, right? And then the second thing it does is it shows that any tool I think in the world is imperfect, but understanding how it's imperfect and the ways that you can maybe accidentally fall into creating an imperfect tool are now known, means that it should lessen the chance of that happening or reduce the amount of times that happens. Whether will or not, we don't know. It depends. Other companies might say that if I was to fix that or remove that, it would cost me more money, so they might decide not to do it. However, like with everything, it also shows how you can then maliciously create models. So if you're publishing models to Hugging Face, it creates new ways to create what would traditionally be called, hidden detonation triggers in the model. So certain things you have to do to cause it to happen. But it's new ways of hiding those or embedding those things in. And so that message goes back to be careful which models you use, only use reputable models, etc. But if you're in college and you want to download, I want a quick model that'll run on my laptop, I might be tempted to go with that one just for, it's not going to use it for any harm, but you don't know if you've got, for example, MCP installed on your laptop and it has access to your desktop tools, then it could cause harm. So there's a N level deep investigation you have to do to check if something will have impact or not, all from the seed of a bad model.
Yeah. And I mean that, not to talk about sales pitches, but that's where the CalypsoAI leaderboards, the CASI score, the security index score, and the agentic warfare resistance really come into their own, because you say it's, your starting point should be a secure model, and then you take it. We could talk all day. There's a ton of other stuff we're going to cover. We'll have to wait for another day, but I think that's we wrap up there today.
Thanks,
Jimmy. Thanks
Cheers.
very much.